anxious to get going on this because we have, if you notice the agenda, we have rearranged things so that the IFAs are updating us towards the beginning of the meeting as opposed to at the end. I'm anxious to hear the reports. But welcome to the Community Reparations Commission meeting for February the 20th. And just a couple of remarks, just very brief remarks. One is that I would ask for you to consider yet another level of work. We've asked for volunteers. We need 3 more to join us for this audit volunteer working group. We're asking members of the commission to join with staff members from city and county as well as civility as we scope out what should be audited and the nature of the work that needs to be done. We think this thing through before it actually gets going, and we can offer a chance for groups to bid on the contract. So please consider volunteering for this work group. Second is that we put forward, as you know, the city and the county accepted, I believe both bodies unanimously, the cessation of the harm, stop the harm resolution that we sent to them. And one of the things I wanted to point out to you is that what we're doing here is relevant to the news that's coming out today. And you know that the reports just in education on the end of grade, end of course exam results are indicating that the disparities that we are addressing are in education are greater now than any time that I can remember. And I've been tracing this work since 2006, officially with a student undergraduate research project. But my first touching on it was actually 1986, when the California Achievement Test had disparities. And we thought that we were in emergency mode then. The reports that just came out, those disparities are larger than they have ever been. And to put it on the pandemic or to say it takes time and to act as though this is just part of what we have, no. This is stop the harm now. And so the work that you're doing, the proposal you're taking are very relevant. We have, I believe, a quorum, but we're going to have a roll call done.
We got it.
We did? Okay.
All right, good evening, everyone. Christine Edwards, your project manager for the Community Reparations Commission. Happy to be here this evening. I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call. As you hear your name, please identify yourself. Dwayne Barton.
Not yet.
Norma Baines.
Here.
Renata Conyers.
Here.
Renetta Copeland. Christopher Gordon. Roy Harris.
Here.
Joyce Harrison.
Here.
Shonda Jackson. Kimberly Jones.
Here.
Dewana Little. Dwayne McAfee.
Here.
Tamari Macon.
Here.
Babette Mays.
Present.
Glenda McDowell.
Here.
Tamara Miller. Dwight Mullen.
Present.
Mildred Nance Carson.
Not yet.
Bernard Oliphant.
Present.
Thomas Priester. Jesse Ray.
Here.
Dwayne Richardson. Eric Robinson.
Here.
Ray Netta Waters. Cece Weston.
Not yet.
Dee Williams.
Here.
MZ Yehuda.
Here.
Keith Young.
Here.
Dee Burris.
Here.
Tiffany DeBelow. Shakiki Giles Batten. Asundu McPeters.
Here.
All right. We do have a quorum. And as others join us, I'll make sure to check them off as well as they are present. Should we move into action?
Yes, we've combined the approval of the agenda and minutes into a single action item. That is not to abbreviate it and say that it is not significant. we were just conscious in making out this agenda of time. And so if there is a motion on the floor to approve the agenda as well as the minutes, I appreciate hearing it.
So moved.
Second.
There's a moved and seconded. Are there objections or amendments that need to be made? If not, I call for a vote. All those in favor of accepting the agenda and the minutes as written, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Great.
Sure. So what I'd like to do is not use our time to go through the survey data here. What I'd like for y'all to do is, if you know, when you get a chance to review that survey data, let us know if you do have questions. It's been provided to you printed out and also virtually. But what I would like to do is just talk about really quickly, a good portion of the commission has completed their agreement, their work agreement and stipend agreement. And so I know that several people were not able to complete it online. So what I did was I just printed it out. Before you leave today, if you could just get a copy of this and fill it out in person. That way I can make sure that everyone receives their stipends and we are all good in terms of paperwork. And so I do have, you know, your names here. Just come see me prior to leaving. We can make sure we do that. So, all right.
Before we move into the next item on the agenda, the IFA updates, let me say to you that I realize many of you all have called, several of you have called or come by my house. And as you're talking to me, I realize how busy you are. And I appreciate the attention that you've given. Those of you sitting at the table, you're seeing absences or people being late. Don't think of it as folk operating on CP time. That's not what's happening. Your schedules are, for me, intimidating. And you're still here doing this work, and I appreciate you. The other part of that is this. Several of you have also encountered doing this work while remaining black. Now, the state of Black Asheville, this undergraduate research project I did for so many years before I retired from UNCA, those statistics were real regarding our health and wellness, regarding our family status and our economic conditions. Those things continue despite your official roles on this commission or even in the community. And if you find yourself feeling overwhelmed, reach out. Reach out. You're not by yourself. I mean, we don't show the community that we can be community. How can we expect it? In other words, we're repairing the damage inside of ourselves first as we offer recommendations for the community. But reach out if you're feeling a little overwhelmed. It's okay. There's help. There's support. I'm anxious to hear the IFAs. And on that, it looks as though we have education. Who's giving that report?
So we want to make sure, and you're fine, so we want to make sure that we have all of the IFA spokespersons are ready to present. We're going to be presenting at the podium. A couple of notes about these presentations. We wanted to make sure we had as much time as possible to hear from the IFA recommendation overviews. And so we actually have a timekeeper today, Tara Brown, who is also our economic development IFA facilitator. So each IFA will get 10 minutes to present. There's a 2-minute warning, which is in yellow, and then the time is up sign is in red. And so we just want to make sure that we are smoothly moving through these presentations. And we're also going to be providing some comment and question cards because we want to make sure that everybody's thoughts can get in the room today. So we're going to pass these out during the presentation. And if you could hold your questions until the end of the discussion, there is a follow-up portion that'll be 20 minutes. And so if you keep those on these comment cards, we will return back to that part where you can read them aloud or have a facilitator read them aloud in the room, and we can go home with these comment cards as well. So
one more point. We have been taking a break between before we begin our old business and new business. But because of the rearrangement of the schedule and what I anticipate from the reports of the IFA, I'm asking you to take your breaks individually as you need. We won't take a 10-minute break in the middle of you, just to facilitate.
Do we have an education spokesperson?
Right here. Ready? Here.
Excuse me, guys.
Slide on here?
There you are.
One more housekeeping note. It's just me en route. I didn't acknowledge our elected officials who are here, particularly the mayor. Mayor, would you please? Yeah. And you are our liaison with the city council, is that it?
I am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there others that I've just missed?
I saw the city manager in there.
Ms. Campbell? There you are. Yes, hello, how are you? Welcome. All right, thank you. Please.
Me? All right, good evening, everybody. We are the Education IFA. As you can see up here, we meet on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month at the YWCA. Everybody is welcome to join us whenever you can. The members are listed here, so I won't go through the names for you. The key harms that we are addressing are the segregation and desegregation of public schools order 1972 and 1991. Obviously, the racial opportunity gap, which has been driven we've gotten more information with the recent Buncombe County report that came out, I think, last week. Loss of community for children and families. I think we're also looking at one of the harms is the suspension and expulsion rate of black students in public schools. So those are areas that we've been researching and trying to come up with solutions for. Right now, we have a couple of recommendations in the works. The first one we're working on has to do with black teacher recruitment and retention. Clearly, we don't have enough black teachers in our schools, so we're trying to increase that number. And then we want to keep the ones that we have. We're trying to put together a program of compensation, policy review, funding support for black educators, cohort groups of black educators who can support each other, and numerous other sweeteners trying to get teachers to come to Asheville and stay here. Another recommendation that we have not really started working on yet, we've talked about it quite a bit, is creating some community-based educational programming involving tutoring and mentoring programs and supplementary education programs to try and address some of the academic issues that we see in our public schools. The third one that we have in the works, and we've kind of drawn up this one already, has to do with school suspensions and expulsions. Some of the ideas we've had are creating a community review board, creating a strong community-based day treatment programs, professional development for all staff members, including behavior management, so that we don't get to the point where we have to suspend our students. Parent advocacy, know your rights, possibly having a parent advocate at suspension meetings so that we can make sure that all avenues are looked at. Suspension has to take place.
So essentially, where we are now is that we have pretty much put together the proposal. We met with data team, and one of the struggles that we've learned is that the data for the city and county is only going back for the last 10 years, which puts what we're trying to propose a little bit in jeopardy because, you know, this has essentially been going on for longer than the 10 plus years. So one of the things that we eventually want to bring to the commission is what are we going to do to get the data for the years before 2012. So right now, we have proposals which pretty much address the harms, but we're missing the key data, the periods, I guess from these dates that have occurred before that. So our drafts right now are great, except for we're now looking to dig in to find the data, the stories, the key information that actually, you know, puts the beef to the harm. So our next steps with what we've been recommending or what we're proposing is to meet with the other IFAs to essentially discuss how our proposals and stop the harms correlate with the other focus areas. So as you can kind of see here, the main thing is with housings is that trying to recruit teachers with no place for them to stay or afford to work is a key harm and a key struggle for why there's a lack of black teachers. And then economic development, we see that there's a correlation between wages. So we do know that in North Carolina, the wages for teachers is lower than all across the U.S. So working with them to come up with some kind of proposal so that it's affordable for teachers to want to actually come and teach in the city or county. And then as Mr. Gordon shared, criminal justice is one of the key harms that we're looking at as far as suspicions and expulsions. It just correlates because teachers don't know how to essentially govern or teach kids of color. So there's methods involved so that we can get a better system in place so that all kids, especially ours, are, you know, treated fairly within the classroom. And then health and wellness correlates with the mental health in general for our teachers. It's because essentially most of the teachers black teachers in Asheville or the city or county who we discussed with, one of the key things is that there is not support across the board for them to be able to check in with other teachers and educators to continue on. So essentially our next steps are to take our proposals, the data, the key takeaways that we have and go into the communities. And we've been inviting teachers, educators, students to our IFAs to get some input, but the next step is to essentially propose these draft harms to communities and get feedback on what they think so far from what we have. We also plan to take our proposals to each IFA within the next month to get their feedback for how we can correlate and put together a final proposal and recommendation. Any questions?
No, you know, honestly, while your points are hot on the table, let's entertain a few questions within our time frame. Please.
Well, I have kind of like a couple of questions. Do you know possible of the Buncombe County and City percentage of African American teachers? Or would you happen to know, or maybe get a
percentage of Buncombe County?
Buncombe County and City teachers, what the percentage is?
I don't have a number for you, but I would, that's one of the things that we can find out. But it's certainly less than 10%. 5%, 7%.
And, I'm sorry, I got it. Do we still have the alternative school? I know we're trying to keep kids in school as the best way we can, and, you know, if they go from one section to an alternative school.
There is, Asheville City Schools does have an alternative school.
Does county have it too?
Buncombe County, I'm not sure. Buncombe County does have a day treatment program, but it's limited in services.
Where's the alternative school for the city at?
I think it may be over in Montford.
And our school used to be.
Oh, okay. And I got one more question. I'm sorry. I just had these questions. And I know you said you're working on this. I just don't know. I'm trying to figure out why the data gets misplaced after 10 years. So,
Well, essentially, they can only go back to get data that's collected, but without addressing that too far, that's one of the main things we want to eventually put on the agenda, because all IFAs are going to run into this issue. It's not just for education. And so within our group, we want to discuss, is there either a way, either with an audit where we have city or council members actually responsible for gathering that, or if there's a budget for a group or an individual that works with the commission that can gather that information. So I don't want to not answer your question, but essentially it's not just education, it's essentially with all groups. We do have a sense of where we think that some of the information and documents are, but essentially what we've discussed is that a IFA, sorry my time is up, but is there an IFA responsibility to gather the data? And that's something that we want to entertain eventually for the next commission meeting.
Go ahead.
She said we were out of time.
You know, we'll continue our question and answer, but just to be fair with all the IFAs, if we could move to the next one, and we will collect your cards to answer your questions at the end of the period. But when the groups are ending before their full time has been exhausted, it's just a good time to answer questions, as many as we can. But at the end of all the presentations, we'll be sure to address your questions. Sure. Economic development.
Yeah, I'm here to talk about economic development, and we met last Thursday. And one of the things, a few of the things we was talking about is establishing
Got new slides.
small business incubator and hubs in all the historically African American neighborhoods. We talked about contracting and fertilizing.
You change the slide?
Oh,
Thank you.
we talked about, contracting and prioritizing black business, and especially when there's contracts happening inside or around African American communities that black businesses should get priority. Another thing we talked about is providing money for existing storefront black businesses. Some initial seed money to help support them, because we know they have been working through and staying in business under some very strenuous conditions, and also supporting, backyard home businesses. We also talked about workforce development training that would start within the school system and in the communities. We talk about wages and economic development projects on city land. Like, we know that there are parts of land in the city and out in the county. So how can we start identifying those properties right now and developing, economic development, ecosystems in those areas that will support, economic development of African American businesses and neighborhoods. Create a business corridor. I think we was talking about the space over there on Charlotte Street, right down from St. Matthias. We know that that's currently city-owned property and that's supposed to be redeveloped. How can that be like a black business corridor that will support and encourage, economic development? And we're saying we would like to see this throughout the city, not in certain locations, but throughout the city and county. Yes, and we also talk about, churches. Right now, we know churches are holding, they holding on to some land. So how do we give churches and different community associations the economic capacity to maintain their position and then grow it and be a model for the city and county? And then, of course, financial education and training. And then, how do we make this last forever? What systems or structures do we create that allows this process to be regenerative and it keeps growing and growing? And how do we leverage this process that we're in right now to hold other institutions accountable for putting in towards reparation? That could be banks, that could be universities, that could be churches. And something else. So this right here, I guess this is a public process for reparations, but we know that there also needs to be a private establishment for reparations. And then there needs to be some reparations in this room with the 22 members. It's like, how do we get the members that was chosen to lead this process to be the first test case, the sample of what it would look like outside of this room? And how do we connect the dots when everybody is sitting down at this table right now as a part of this process? How do we create that initial momentum here and with our networks and then take that out and, and put it out throughout the city and the county?
Questions?
No, I just had a question when Dwayne was speaking about how could we, set those things up and keep them sustainable. It's by setting up a trust for it, to keep it in the way it just generate income, and those who pull from it will just stand and continue to just build that work for the black community. Just setting up a trust with Lord and moving forward from there.
I realize it's out of the norm to accept comments and questions from folk who are not on the commission, but I'm not seeing questions from the commissioners just at this point. Are there?
That's good.
Let's go to public forum. If there are questions, come to you now. Write them down.
While they're coming up, I just want to say quickly that Mr. Richardson has also been our spokesperson for economic development, commission member Richardson, and he is regretful that he's not here in person, but I do have him on text, and he has sent me some questions for the ILA, so I might ask questions on behalf of Mr. Richardson that he sent me.
She was saying, Tara was saying that Dwayne Richardson's also a spokesperson for economic development, and so she is communicating with him through text, so he might submit some questions as well that we can put in the room.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Good evening on behalf of Health and Wellness. I wanted to kind of give a summary of where we are and what we've been working on. What you see on behalf of Dr. Tamara Nick and Renata Connors and Norma Bain. We have been concentrating and have had several categories of when we were doing the process of brainstorming and organically we developed categories summarizing. So you'll see that when we talked about harms addressed, we felt that health and wellness impacts everybody, period. What Buncombe County talked about racism being one of the public health issues. So this seems to connect all of our IFAs to some extent. Well, what you'll notice is what we were talking about, key harms in here, the health disparities leading to deaths of African Americans. We talk about infant mortality, and the big one is access, the inability to access the care that people needed. So we have these categories, and there's 7 of these, but there's also there's 3 or 4 more, and I'll go into a little bit in the categories, but for the provision of health care, we knew that some of the main things were, how do we, in this day and age, have access for health care regardless of where people are in their journey? And so some of this was, creating non-punitive, these are just suggestions, access to substance abuse treatment. It's a big one. We know there are constantly issues around that. Yes? Oh, I'm sorry. What about the issues around suicide for African Americans? Where are the resources supporting those who have mental health illnesses? Identifying, how can we identify Asheville African American natives or those in Asheville and Buncombe County that have chronic diseases and provide the preventative health care for that? Some of this is connecting social determinants of health. We hear that a lot now. We hear that 80% of one's total health is not just the 20%, but all of the other things that influence somebody's health, whether it's housing, whether it's economics, whether it's education. So again, we're noticing that there are threads of health and wellness related issues to all of the IFAs. Eliminating bias and implementing accountability of staff and providers. How do we eliminate and provide training so that those that are responsible for the care of all of us can work beyond the implicit bias that could unfortunately lead to lesser quality health care for African Americans. Stopping the harms and decreasing barriers, a big one. How do we not just stop the harms, but address them from occurring over and over and over again? And what does that mean as far as in the health and wellness sphere? Again, we've got lots of, I think there's like 40 to 50 potential strategies and recommendations that are subcategories of all of these. And so I'll go to a couple of them so I can review those with you. Holding individuals accountable. When we talk about eliminating interpersonal racism and bias, what are the processes that then go back and address the biases that have occurred, and how do we then hold healthcare providers accountable? If they're not held accountable, then how do we make this better, or how do you continue on? So some examples of that: to receive county and city funding, perhaps there's a mandate that there's training that has to occur. A lot of times when we talk about what can happen, people listen to dollar signs. So if you want to receive money for certain strategies, then maybe again it's about the training and mandatory. I think we've got to the point where it's okay to say that training is optional, but in this case it's not. I think everybody's tired of optional training. It's important to make some of it mandatory. Employment improvement plans, firing staff. How is it that we often see the same staff that have been involved in issues around providing inadequate health? How come they're not held accountable? And sometimes maybe they need to be replaced or fired. So we were really getting into the nitty-gritty of what this meant, and we still have a lot of digging to go. When we talk about African American healing and healthy spaces, there used to be health centers and African American hospitals. Are there not the opportunities for us to have healing spaces, again, that specifically hone in on those issues that particularly affect African Americans more than other demographics? African American representation in decision making. We've had this conversation recently about the diversity of groups, and people say, oh, we've got to include everyone. But the big issue is, how inclusive are you at the decision-making table? It's okay to include all voices, but the power structures are really important when you look at who gets to buy in and make those decisions collectively. You can be invited to a conversation, but if you don't have a voice in making the decision, were you able to affect the change you wanted to change? So, again, overlapping with other IFAs, social determinants of health, quality of housing. We talk about housing issues around mold, we talk about insufficient housing, safe housing, access to health information about public health issues. What are our public, we saw a lot of public health initiatives around COVID, but what are some of the other ones that maybe have kind of gone under the radar? And when do we start really looking at our public education to help people stay well and have that health outcome? How are we going to gain community buy-in? There's a couple of things that the Health and Wellness IFA really was interested in. How do we, we're a small group, there's only 3 of us, 3 of the commissioners and me, but we don't have all the answers. So we thought it was really important for us to be able to provide some opportunities for public input. So we have in front of you an opportunity for you to come and anyone to come and join us Saturday at United Way, and it's particularly around health and wellness because we wanted to get public input as well. We thought that was critical. There will be food, there will be music, there will be opportunities to engage and small work sessions so that we can hear again what might be out there. While we have lots of sub-recommendations in 9 or 10 categories, we might have missed something, particularly if there's an intersection. So we wanted to make that open to the public. We hope to see you there. Again, this is the first. We're excited that this is something that we're partnering with RJC and the Center for Participatory Change, but we're also excited that this might be the first of a few of those as we move further into kind of really going into weeds as to what would stop us from doing certain sub-initiatives. The other thing is podcasts. We're interested in interviewing people. You know, I think someone said something earlier about there being a lack of data beyond the dates that you're talking about. Well, we shouldn't ignore communal voices. What about elders in the community that have circumstances and issues around what they suffered not getting access to health care? Have we recorded those voices? Maybe we get to the point that we just have listening sessions. Well, we have a recorder and we ask you, what did you suffer? What did you go through? And then we compile that so that we have some of the data that might not be the numbers data, but just as important listening to voices. So we're excited about some of the community buy-in opportunities we have here. And we hope that we see you all Saturday.
Questions?
Yeah.
How does climate change play in the health and wellness? Are you considering climate change and environmental justice as part of your health and wellness?
We didn't put that on our list. Yeah, we didn't think it.
Thank you.
Yes, it's important.
This is the reason why we like to have, again, public input, because that's something we could explore. Thank you.
I do want to say, if anybody's coming to this Saturday, can you go ahead and register with the QR code on it, so that way we can get a count of how many people's coming, you know, how many's going to be there. So if you want to come Saturday.
I was just informed that I forget about the virtual world. I just forget. As you're asking questions or making comments, would you mind identifying yourself? Give your name.
And it helps us keep the minutes as well, so we can track who's asking what question and et cetera. So if you could just identify your name and project into the room. But really good comments. Thank you.
Any additional questions?
I actually had a question. Christine, just a really quick question. You touched on this, but I want to hear a little bit more about your experience working with the data that's available and what could be more helpful, if anything, with your IFA.
We've, I think it's Ginger from Buncombe County has been a great support of helping us get some of those earlier data requests satisfied. One of the things that we do know, similar to other groups, is that there's some data that we're going to have to do some deeper digging with. Again, when we talk about Black-owned or Black-operated health spaces in the earlier part of the decade, there may not be as much information. Also, is there a lot of historical information or documentation around midwifery, So we're really trying to figure out the best place. Some of it may not be the traditional methods of data, so we may need to do some additional research. But we have access to librarians, we have access to other health providers who, or those in certain career paths that said, oh, well, you know, we might be able to have some historical context when it comes to midwives and how they supported African American births in Buncombe County. So some of it is not just the data crunching for the quantitative, but the qualitative is what we're going to have to look for too. And some of that may be some deeper digging in different types of databases or housing of, you know, whether we're going to libraries, whether we're going to the state library in North Carolina, whether we're going to medical libraries. So we have some options we haven't yet explored.
Thank you, Dr. Weldon.
I'm sure Representative Howard.
Good evening. My name is Bobette Mays, and as you see that we meet on the second and fourth Tuesday at the Wesley Grant Center now. We will meet tomorrow evening, as a matter of fact, so we haven't really had an opportunity to really dig into it, but we have done some things, and the members, as you'll see up here. And the key harms that we have addressed are the displacement of black homes and neighborhoods due to urban renewal, which is something that we have seen that has been going on since the 60s and 70s, and it's still probably going on now. Recommendations, overview, and all city and county owned land that was taken from blacks be returned. We have thought about that, but we did request that the city and the county would give us data on what properties were now owned by the city. We do have that information. They have sent that to us. So we do know what, if they're in use, if it's occupied, or if it's not in use. So we've got that started. And is there any overlap with another IFA? How can you address harms together? Economic development, if people aren't paid a living wage or can't find suitable employment, they can't afford to live in Asheville. We all know that's a known fact. Because you're not at the pay grade of $15 or $17 and maybe even $20 an hour, that people are not able to afford what the living situation in Asheville, and even in Buncombe County, because it is rising even above that. And criminal justice, if a person has been in the system, they're unable to even secure public housing. So there's a disadvantage to that. So where are they, and what do they do? And so we looked at the fact that housing encompasses everything of all the other IFAs, because where you live and your environment that you're in can cause a lot of things with your health, economic development, criminal justice. All of those areas can be impacted. And how are you gaining community buy-ins? And we're still working, because we have to start at the bottom. We could not do a broad picture. We did look at some areas, for instance, we talked about Bartlett Arms, which used to be for seniors, which is now changed to it's everyone, and the harm it is doing to some of the people that are in Bartlett Arms or in the Aston Park Towers now, that they're boxed in with a lot of different other people that are either homeless or disadvantaged people. And so what can we do for those seniors that are locked in and they don't make enough, their income is not enough for them to move out. They cannot go into assisted living, so they're kind of like they're stuck. So what can we do to make sure that impacts their health and wellness? So those are some of the ideas that we do, but like I said, we will meet tomorrow night, but it is a slow process, and we realize that we can ask for a lot of things, but we have to start from the basis of the root of what the problem was in the first place, and then we move from that. Do you have any questions?
Ms. President, have you all addressed, have you all started talking about gentrification, if that's?
We've talked about gentrification, we've touched on that, but you know, when we look at the, I think one of the things that is really heartbreaking is when we look at the percentage of African Americans in Buncombe County that actually live in Buncombe County. So you can't get around to the fact that any neighborhood that you go into, you're not just gonna see all of us. And so we have to address that because we have been moved out. We realize that everything that we've had, we've lost. We've been moved out, we're in the outlines. Some of the people that we see have been generations of being in public housing. They can't move, they can't do anything else, and it stays the same. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Are you aware that where I live in Battery Park and the Vanderbilt get a stipend from a national churches organization with, we need more people of color there. There are hardly any. But that's a national organization of churches.
But I think there's a qualified, I don't know for sure, but there's a qualification and for the applications that you fill out. And you have to realize that some of our seniors that probably will not qualify for being in that area because of what they make. And they not, you have to remember, when you start looking at applications for assistance and the stipends that go out within the churches, that may not get out to all of us. So maybe that is something we need to look at.
Well, the only thing that I know is that you have to be over 60.
Mm-hmm.
And some people don't pay a lot. Some of us do pay a lot of our Social Security. There still needs to be more color in those buildings. I wonder if anybody has ever thought about that.
Well, maybe that is something that we can consider as we work in dealing to the housing.
Ms. Mayor, any question?
Yes, Mr. Oliver.
Bernard Oliphant, has your IFA explored the impacts and the lingering impacts of redlining? And does redlining still go on today? And what impacts it's having? And how redlining, along with the urban renewal process, wiped out the clusters of black communities?
Yes, we have, and it's very sad, and we think about it and we talk about it. But we are looking into that. But the thing that we look at is, we know the harm, we know what has happened, but what can we do to move forward? And that's what we're trying to really, we know there's not going to be money that can be given. How do we replace that harm? What do we do? And how do we regain it? That was one of the reasons why we wanted to go back and ask the city and county about how many properties did they own. And that was one of the things that we asked for.
One of the, Joyce Harrison, one of the things that we were asking the city and the county to come back and talk to us about was the properties that were taken by the city and the county for urban renewal, to show us those properties, what happened to those properties, and where do we stand on getting some of that property back. With the redlining piece, supposedly there's a federal government law about the redlining, but we all know that some of the federal government guidelines don't always work for all of us. But looking at the redlining, we're trying to figure out how do we address what is still going on with the redlining in communities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity for the Criminal Justice IFA work group to come before you. I just want to, for the correction of the minutes, I am also a member of the Housing IFA work group as well. I just wanted to say that our recommendations, of course, are collective, and it represents our individual experiences and backgrounds. And from a democratic standpoint, several of the harms that we addressed was disproportionate arrest of black individuals in Buncombe County and discriminatory policing practices. And that's just a general statement. I would just say, for me, everything goes back to economic disparity, systemic racism, and exclusion from the social, cultural, and economic milieus of society. Also, we talked about the recommendations. Here are two here that are pretty generic and pretty general. Fund record expungement clinics, which is, pretty short-term and pretty durable, I would say. There's been some of that to go on, and we work with several attorneys who provided their services to do so. And also, I believe Eric Jackson's wife, who is now with the Buncombe County District Attorney, we worked with her on expungement issues in the past when she had a nonprofit up on Wall Street. Also, to provide funding to reentry services. As you know, they're already funded, and they're in quite a few counties in North Carolina. One of the things, since I'm kind of a data person, is I would like to see the performance-based outcomes of some of the data as per the reentry program here in Buncombe County, and along racial composition or ethnic composition lines. Let me just also say that some of the issues that we discussed were Black youth and adults who are overrepresented in jails and prison populations. In 12 states in the United States, Blacks represent over 50% of prison populations. That's very significant, and North Carolina is one of those. Jail diversion, underutilized by Black men and youth, and over-policing in low-income areas. As y'all know, specifically locally here in Asheville, there's been much input by people who live in RAD housing or used to be publicly assisted housing, who were saying that they wanted APD providing security. A lot of housing authorities have hired private security and called police, regular police, for backup. As you know, with the more contact that law enforcement officers have with Black people, there tends to be very negative and deadly outcomes oftentimes, for everything from traffic stops to general security. So I think that probably needs to be looked at. I think people are, of course, plying illegal trade simply because of economic isolation and family disintegration, but that's another specific issue. Our supporting data comes from a plethora of sources. Safety and Justice Challenge, Buncombe County, of course, from the MacArthur Foundation, the North Carolina Department of Instruction. We talk about the school-to-prison pipeline, very real in Asheville City Schools in Buncombe County. As a matter of fact, in 2020, we were summoned at Asheville Middle School, and there were 24 Black youths who were not only expelled, but also criminal charges brought against. And thanks to city officials, including Deborah Campbell, our manager, and the chief of police, those charges were dropped, and some positive things came out of that. Also, our data comes from the Brookings Institution, 6 policies to address problems affecting Black boys and men, and also some from the North Carolina Task Force for Racial Equity and Criminal Justice, the report from 2020, which was provided to us last week at our meeting, and also our old trusty traffic stop data. The way that we got, we worked very well with Asheville City Council to get written consent to search passed by them. It was an educational process that can be replicated, and also utilizing data to ban the box by Buncombe County, City of Asheville, and Mission Health Systems. Our short-term recommendations, use of jail review team, which is in process right now, and that's something we all probably need to drill down on to see how we can help. Reducing the school-to-prison pipeline, we need to look at the role of SROs and the data that goes with that. Educate educators regarding this. Hire more culturally competent and teachers and those who hopefully love Black children. Hire private security in RAD, and that is in process. I need to report. I saw where the Asheville Housing Authority was hiring private security officers and multiples of them, so that's pretty good news, and I've been in contact with Chief Zach on a very tangential level. Our midterm recommendations: supportive services, education, economic assistance to pay fines, and low barrier shelters where there's a requirement not to be so-called sober, if that's such a thing. Supportive services and education, especially that. We look at the data in terms of the inmates that are there, and a lot of them come out of school prematurely and some other things. Review ACS policies, Asheville City Schools. They have policies that they instituted when I went there in 1971 prior to integration. I only spent 1 year there, and those policies were put in place, and we did clear the school board once those students had been expelled. And we look back, and those policies were instituted then, and they remain now. Those really do need to be looked at in terms of expelling students. Educate lawmakers of the unintended consequences for legislation that creates a new crime, modifies or even alters some of the penalties for it. Sometimes you can have unintended consequences. Long-term living wage job training and placement. I supplied, Cam Howard came here, as y'all know, back in the fall, and we supplied a program to him that I'm working to institute right here in Asheville with the NCDOT and some folks out of Charlotte. And it's for living wage employment. It pertains to I-26. It is a time-trusted program. Culturally competent employers who can offer portals of advancement for trainees, financial literacy to create generational wealth via home and business ownership training. That intersects, as y'all know, with housing and the others, economic development, fatherhood training, with repatriation of black men back into the community. That is a missing element from our community, is our black men. And most of them are incarcerated or involved in the criminal justice system who've been removed or had some interaction. Removing the just rules for diversion programs. Altruism, I call that just me, wishing or whatever. Support real reparations on a national level. And then again, to qualified immunity. I know we haven't talked about it in some of the meetings, but it gives police officers immunity from whatever happens during a traffic stop or an incursion, such that it really supersedes constitutional rights of individuals. Are there any questions or input that you might have? I don't want to run over time. Yes.
Sandu McPeters, have you all had the opportunity to have anybody from, whether it's criminal justice or law enforcement, at your meetings to discuss?
Mike Lamb has been there.
Okay.
Yes, and I've worked with Mike now for 3 or 4 years. We worked with him to get written consent to search. Really, many of the leadership team with the Asheville Police Department and the Public Safety Committee and city council members individually, they have been receptive. Where before, when we encountered them, they had no data, and now they are ensconced in data collection. So some of these local efforts do change things, and keep in mind that data is something that is not personal and cannot be argued with, and it is my North Star, I would say, in getting anything done in this town. Yes, ma'am.
Renata, I did the percentage thing, so have you, I don't know if this can be done or has it been done, what is the percentage of black males that are in jail now, and then what is the percentage of black males or females that their records has been sponged?
That information is something that we're working on with Ms. Tiffany from Buncombe County Justice Center. We've asked for that information by racial category. Some of it's sort of been provided, but we have not drilled down into those details. We do know, and let me just say this, some of the reporting that was given us was during the COVID epidemic when the jail population had 8 blacks in it, and a few whites. So we want to kind of get into more now what's real and going back into an unusual period. So that is a process that we are working together towards, is drilling down and getting trend analysis, if you will. Historical data is very good, but more importantly, there is trend analysis. And we need a series of years. We're not just interested in last year, but if we can get at least 3 years, we could probably get a more composite picture of it. So that is in process. Yes, ma'am.
So, I'm sorry, along with the males, do you know maybe what the percentage is for females too?
It is very high. We discussed that, and they have a study out the Bureau Institute just did on Buncombe County Jail about the criminal women who are involved in the criminal justice system in Buncombe County, and it is probably at least double that of white females. And you know that we are, black women, we are 11.3% of Asheville City and probably like 9% of Buncombe County. So it is absolutely stunning.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were addressing a number of questions during the presentations, and I noticed some of you all were still writing questions down. But this is a good time to address those. Mr. Oliphant?
Going back to the education, Bernard Oliphant, going back to the education committee, and you mentioned that some of the teachers do not know how to deal with people of color. Is it possible for us to have a mandatory class, as it was said, for housing and some other training, a mandatory Race Relations Institute training for all staff and all teachers?
That is one of our recommendations.
Okay,
It will be
thank
one
you.
of our recommendations. Not only the racial training, but also behavior management training, so that our teachers and staff know how to deal and how to change behaviors without punishing.
And it may be sensitivity training that some of them need.
Correct.
Questions, comments? Commission members?
I don't know if this is a question, but I am curious. You mentioned suspensions and expulsions, and I'm very much aware that they're high. I did not hear you mention any programs possibly that could help those. So may I just recommend an old program that worked quite well for many years in Asheville City Schools, and that was mediation programs, peer-to-peer, young people learning to solve their problems.
Duly noted.
I got a,
Renata?
sorry, Renata, do we, this is for education, also, do you, I know years ago I used to do like the one-on-one, do we still have, what is it, like brother, sister,
Big brother,
big brother, big
sister.
sister? Yes. Do we still have that? Is it still in effect, and how effective it is for the, because when you've got kids who are in school and, and I know it's hard for kids right now, because right now, peer pressure is so bad. It really is. And, but is the Big Brother, Big Sister still going, or is it in certain schools, or do you know if it's in certain schools, or?
So I don't think Big Brother is part of the school system.
It's not.
a
Oh,
support
it's
system
not?
that it supports
So-
kids in schools.
Is there any way that could possibly collaborate somehow?
Yeah, I think so. I think when we get to our community educational, we haven't put together a proposal yet for our community centers. But we want to have some kind of community centers that are going to provide supplemental and support education for our kids. So community-based and led by black folks as teachers and counselors and things like that. And in a situation like that, we can certainly collaborate with any other social group to provide services and supports for our kids.
I got one more question.
We're
I'm
coming
sorry.
to that, but we're working on it.
I'm in the questions tonight, I'm sorry. So is the Wesley Grant, Arthur Eddington Center, are they used for programs after school when kids get out of school? Not just small kids, I'm talking about middle school, high school. Are those used, is those centers used for kids to come, hang out, get homework done, have a one-on-one time with somebody just in case they need somebody to talk to? Does anybody know that? I'm just asking.
I think there are programs like that across the city and the county, but we want to kind of coordinate all of those so that everybody's kind of on the same page and providing, the full spectrum of supports that our kids need to be successful. So that's coming, but we're working on that one.
And I know little kids are great, but I'm really looking more at the middle school and high school. That's really where the peer pressure is hitting more. Besides little kids, yes, but middle school and high school is really getting rough. So.
So
we hope to
I do have a question. I hear a lot of people referring back to existing programs and so forth. I guess my question deals with, if you don't see data on what they're doing and they don't have performance metrics, how do you know that they're gonna perform any differently now? I mean, that's a logical thing to say, okay, we'll go with what we have and maybe use an existing program. But if they aren't doing that well now, what makes you think they're gonna improve?
I just think there could be a
Without
change,
data.
so.
Without data. I always want to see what you've done. It needs to be measurable. It needs to have metrics. And they need to be tangible. It's not personal. It has nothing. You see, a lot of this that we're involved in, for me, I have noticed that people want to perpetuate a paycheck and a program. And that hurts people who are the most vulnerable people. You have to be really on point about, number one, what you're after. If you're after the root cause and a solution, it may be outside the purview of existing program providers to do that. And it'll be based on data, but that's just my input.
Can I just comment on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Please. I work with the after-school program and a summer program in the county. And data is important, but the root of the problem is the families and the homes. It's hard to get middle school and high school kids to come after school together, for you to work with them because they want to be with their friends and their social groups and they don't want to be there. What we're losing is, I can tell you the data of what we do. I can show you that. I can show you the impact of those kids. But I think that we, educators, we need to sit down, and it's got to start at the root of what the problem is. And if we need to come together to find out how we can make a difference, that's where it starts from. It's not just where your data is. I'm talking about people. I'm talking about the people that I see and the problems that they have. And when you talk about what we can do in the school system, you got to think about what you got to do in the home too, because these kids are kids. And so we see some things that you would not believe. If you're not there, you don't hear them talk. Kids will tell you everything that goes on with them if you open up the door to let them talk to you without judging them. So you can get data from all the way across the river. But if you're not in there with them, talking to them, seeing what impact on that is, that's where you have to start your basis from. And it's not just the city, but it's the county too. Because I've seen it in all aspects. And you got to catch them before they go to middle school and high school. Because by that time, they don't want to hear what you have to say when they get into that space. So we got to catch them now. But we have to catch the parents at the same time, because they're struggling too. Health and wellness, all of those things. That's what I needed to say.
Thank you. Very nice. We're running.
One last question. For the criminal justice side,
Yes.
Joyce Harrison, when you get your data, would you have them to also take out the parts of people that are not residents of North Carolina that are incarcerated because they're in North Carolina, so that those numbers don't get screwed about what we're looking for? Okay?
Not residents of the state of North Carolina?
Yeah.
Buncombe
Buncombe
County.
County.
Buncombe County is really.
Yeah, because what they're going to give you in the statistical information is all incarcerated people. Well, what you want to take out is the ones that have been in harm in Buncombe and Asheville in the city, is what you want to look at.
Okay, that is a question we've also posed to the Reentry Council, specifically about the numbers of transients that they've brought that have been released on probation and parole who have come here for these programs. So that is another data point that we are highly interested in, because we've noted just in our meetings in that Reentry Council, a lot of folk who are receiving services in Buncombe County who come from other counties.
Right, okay, yeah, okay.
So, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please pass down your cards. If you have questions or comments that you didn't get a chance to ask, if you could pass those down, and we can make sure we put them on record and collect those. Thank you. Thank you for entertaining our new process. I thought that was a really good opportunity for information sharing and hearing from everybody.
Wait, hold on.
Kids, Scott, come here. Come here. I'm saying, but among the first meetings that we had as a commission, I received some of the harshest criticism I've received as chair when the youth group visited and I failed to recognize them. It was my fault and put it on me. I'm not doing that again.
All right.
If you all would please introduce yourselves, I appreciate it.
Okay, so hi everyone. So you will see this group, amazing group of humans at these meetings. They're part of the Reparation documentation team. They will be coming in here. They'll be wanting to interview you. They're going to be doing some podcasting, video storytelling, a variety of different things. And I'm going to step back. I'm just the project manager advisor in this situation. I'm Elizabeth Garland, STM Multimedia, Arteria Collective. Name, grade, yes.
Hi everyone, my name is Eden Mosley. I'm currently a junior that attends Carolina Bay School. I used to attend Asheville City Schools.
I remember you.
I work with BSU Asheville, Black Student Union Asheville, with Black Student Union not just in the private independent schools but also in the public schooling. I try to stay active in the community, and I really hope and push for the reparations to be dispersed within our Black residents. So.
Okay. I'm Miles Clark. I'm in 8th grade. I also take day school.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm Lyndon Super. I'm also in the 11th grade, and I attend Buncombe County Urban College.
My name is Ella Estrada, and I'm a sophomore at Asheville High.
My name is Caroline Roth, and I'm a freshman at Asheville High.
Okay. I'm Tajon Jones, and I'm a senior at UNC Asheville. Okay. And the basketball player, what's up? Yo, want the Big Sam?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right.
Our next item is under old business.
Mr. Chairman, just before you go to that.
Yes, Mr. Harris, please.
What is the common thread between all of these IFAs? There got to be a common thread somewhere. Is it economics, it's education, housing, or whatever? And who's following that? Who's going to bring all that together? That's one of the concerns I have.
If you don't mind, ma'am, I was taking notes on that because I was asking basically the same questions. What are the commonalities that are being presented to the IFAs? And one of the commonalities was the need for data. All the groups are talking about the need for data and so the construction of our audit becomes even more crucial. The second thing that I picked up on was that all of you all seem to be dependent on narrative. You're needing narrative, whether it's the suffering or the experiences, but you want to hear the stories. And I think that was a common thing. One that I'm adding to you now is that I'm also asking as a commonality to begin the construction of your formal proposals that you'll put before the commission. I'd like to read those and the commission consider those as we think about which ones we are going to prioritize and send to the Buncombe County Commissioners and the Asheville City Council.
Race relations training.
Yes, and clearly in all the areas, again, whether it was the law enforcement, the classroom, healthcare, some form of race relations training, some form of cultural competencies. You all were using different terms for it. And I'm sure there were some other commonalities. And if they are, if you could put them on those note cards and get them back to us, I can get those back to you as we look at our surveys. And if I may begin as chairman for criminal justice, the data points that I was being asked for before retiring from the UNCA, I never did that, and I haven't seen them. are the actual courtroom results. What are the, by race and by gender, the decisions and sentences of Plymouth County Supreme Court?
Salon and I, Dr. Mullen.
Yes.
Tiffany is actually working with us on that, so we'll be able to pull that and get that to you.
And I'm not picking on judges. I was actually asked by 2 judges to proceed with that type of research. They wanted to know. They wanted to know.
Dr. Mullen, quick question. Go ahead.
Yes.
Dwayne McAfee. There's another common thread that I think is very important that we talk about. When we just had the criminal justice up, also criminal justice and education are tied hand in hand. And we find in my lifetime that the less educated you are, the more likely you are to be caught up in the trap. And we are having our young people being stamped for the criminal justice system as early as 12 years old, and sometimes earlier. I demand that we get a commission, we put something in place so that if we know our children are falling behind, why are we allowing them to get suspended from school where there's no education, there's no constructive learning, there's nothing going on? We need, if they have to be suspended, we need to have them be able to go somewhere, be somewhere constructive with the right people in front of them so that they can understand they have a better path.
Dr. Mo, just as a follow-up, like for time constraints, we weren't able to go through our full proposal for our Stopping the Harm, Mr. McAfee, but that does address the portion of the harm in there about the contingencies of if you are expelled or continue your education. So thank you for bringing it up, and we have discussed that.
And I intend to be at every one of your meetings from here going forward.
Can I? I'm sorry, I know I don't want to get you called up, but I want to, as for criminal justice, but I want to go back on what Bobette said about education and criminal justice going to, but as you say, it starts from the home. Yes. It really starts from the home where it starts. So if it's not starting at the home, this is where it gets worse. The system is getting, not the system, the kids are getting worse because they're not learning at home. I don't have any kids, but I do have friends with kids, and I see how these kids are sometimes, or just out and about, and I notice, a kid's home, when they're home, they fine and everything, but when they get out in the street, that's it. Their I don't want the persona or whatever changes. So it really starts at home, and not all parents are bad, and I'm not saying parents are bad. But I also think that parents need to stick to, if your child gets in trouble at school, be that school backup. You say, hey, I'll be there, I'll do this, I'll do that. And it starts from the home. And that's where it starts from, And this is why most of the time we have most of our kids in jail, black kids in jail, And for the stupid, it's for stupid things,
When you, and again, I'm sorry, Dr. Mullen, D. Williams for public interest. There's 2 types of data. There's quantitative data and there's qualitative data, which are, as you say, Bobette, when she said, talking to parents and going into the home. When you knock on those doors, and I've done it in all the public housing, all of the developments in Asheville, and you look in those eyes and you see absolutely nothing. And you see children families who are absolutely cut off. The worst thing in the world is being a human being and being cut off economically, socially, and culturally. And so a lot of us that sit at this table, we don't really know what that's really, really like unless you came from that environment and you happen to have survived it. So a lot of that, as you say, with the family, but a lot of the families are absolutely in a state of absolute destruction. And that we see the results of that. And we have to be real about it. We do. And that's our responsibility. That's something that we have to take care of. But that's another project.
Is it
I think as we're thinking about these impact areas, think about how what you can do and recommend can impact opportunities for families. I think that's one takeaway we could probably take from the conversation, and how to use the work we're supposed to be doing to address that. I think the second thing, as we talk about criminal justice, so yes, we definitely have to make sure that young people are informed and educated and stress that, but we also, have to do other things around that. We have to look at those that are in the schools already, make sure that they're prepared. We have to make sure that there's representation. Part of the recommendations that we're working on in criminal justice tries to address all of that, including bringing Black people into Asheville and connecting with the housing to make sure that they're housed appropriately so that they're prepared to teach Black students, about the things that they need to know in order to keep them out of these spaces where there's no opportunities. So I think if we could just look in our impact focus areas and try to address that within that area, and then when there are linkages, go to other IFAs, I think that we can kind of, do a lot with one shot.
And let me add a point here. In the social sciences and the identification of these social determinants that you're looking at, this is something that the social sciences, even at the university level, are struggling with, is the interrelatedness of the areas that we are talking about. What we're doing is real, and it ain't easy. And so as you're struggling with that, note that this is something that has crucial outcomes if you can crack this nut. And one of the ways we do it is the personalization of our familiarity with Asheville. We know what works and what has not worked. Now let's articulate it. And as my sister says, data-based articulation will go a long way. So.
I do want to make sure that we stay on track, and we're able to accomplish what we want to accomplish on our agenda. We might need to take some of that time from that roundtable check-in at the end, and let's see if we can go back to old business and speed through these votes and then go to our speaker. Is that okay?
Yeah, let me do one thing. Do we have the public comments list?
There are no folks for public comment.
Good, that's what's checking. Okay, fine. Please, one more comment.
I just want to, we talk about the breakdown of the Black family home. Well, that breakdown was designed by systemic racism.
Yes.
Because of the fact that our families are broken down and we don't seem to have the direction that we need for our young people, what we have to do is start thinking outside of the box. And we have to be able to educate and have our children be successful, irregardless of what family unit they come from. Because if we say they need to come from the right family unit to be successful, and then the system has broken down the family unit, we're in a quagmire. We can't get anywhere. We have to elevate those in the family structure, irregardless of their parents, their grandparents, irregardless of their geographical location. We have to find a way to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Just go.
As Mr. McAfee just alluded to, when we start looking at the family unit, is the family unit taught in our school right now? Somehow the legacy of what we've come through is not taught. In fact, if you look at what's happening in Florida with DeSantis, he's absolutely outlawed any teaching that relates to race relations or anything else. And that's almost what's happening here. Race relations is completely outlawed or not taught in our school. So the building unit, which is part of the school, doesn't exist. And our kids have no way to reach back to the pride of where they came from. And it's completely lost.
CRT.
Who's this? Who's this? All right. As we move on through this agenda, We have old business, and the three different components of it. We also have a speaker from the Racial Justice Coalition as a presentation for us. So we have a bit of business to still cover for the evening. For the Code of Ethics policy, I'm wondering if there is an entertainment of their comments, of their discussion regarding the Code of Ethics policy.
Yeah, I'm not feeling it. I'm not understanding it. I'm not understanding the Code of Ethics, and I'm not understanding its changes and considerations. So are we talking, we're gonna go by all three of them, or are they all one? They all under one category?
Let's do the Code of Ethics first.
Yeah, I'm not understanding it. I'm not understanding, why we doing this extra. I think, like everybody keep talking about how challenging it is for our community to live here. And I think, that should be the focus, like us connecting the dots and really, being creative and imaginative, like how we're gonna transform our communities. And I'm not understanding how this, especially if it's coming from the city who created this in the first place, and why we here, telling us that we have to go by this strict line and do this, you do this and do that. I'm not understanding that. I think our priority and focus should be on at hand. What recommendations are we gonna create amongst ourselves that's gonna, bring some relief to our communities? And that should be the number one focus. And we should let that be first, and then send it to the city and the county, and then they can do all this, whatever they gotta do to our recommendations. But I'm not feeling it. Yes.
Comments up front? Is it possible to, for, Sandra, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say that we met with the attorneys with our.
A little louder, please.
I was gonna say that we met with our attorney during our IFA for our last meeting, and some of the same sentiments, Mr. Martin, that you brought up, we had the same, but it was explained to us in a way that I guess it left us with some ease. So I didn't know, Brad, if you would maybe share some of the same comments that you mentioned to us at the IFA. I think it may help address some of the same comments in ways that we felt at our meeting.
Oh, yeah, okay.
If you'd like, Mr. Chair. So, without going into too much detail about this, you've already adopted a set of procedural rules. That is about process. That allows you to go about your meetings in a way that is structured so that your meetings can be as effective as you want them to be. It is very, very common for groups such as you, public bodies, to have not only a set of rules and procedures, but a code of ethics. And we, myself and the legal team from the county got together and put this as a proposal for you. It's based upon the codes of ethics that are generally put together for city councils and county commissions throughout the state. It was originally modeled after an exhibit from the North Carolina School of Government. But while the rules of procedure are about process, these rules are set up to give you character and commitment guidelines. Again, very similar to rules of procedure, they are designed to help you function so that you are on the same page. But the page should be written by you. And we presented these to you as a model, as a starting point. If there is anything in these rules that you feel is out of line with the way you would like to conduct your meetings, then we are here as a service to you to provide changes and adapt that to the kind of structure, if any, that you would like to have. But the hope is that these rules, which are generally very common, are designed to give you the support that you need. but they are not designed, nor should we ever allow these kind of rules to be set up in a way that restricts the creativity and the purpose that this group is set up to utilize. So let me say, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have about this particular document, but our hope truly is that we can give you something, and if it's different from this, or if it's nothing at all, that will allow you to feel that you have received the maximum benefit from it. It came about as a request from this body, but this body has the full power to move in a different direction, or to move forward with what we have here, or anything in between. And I give you the commitment of myself and the county attorney that will help design those in a way that would be helpful. And now, I can't remember exactly what was said at the IFA meeting, but I'm happy to address any points you thought were most pertinent to this.
Essentially, you just kind of confirm with us that any recommendations and proposals that we make, that from what I heard, you were backing us up, that you will do, along with your team, the best to look over those to make sure that we can try to get it passed. So that's essentially what I kind of heard.
Yeah, and I don't think I could have said it any better. City staff, county staff, as well as the attorneys are here for you. We want you to give us the opportunity to provide you with as much service as we possibly can through either the Code of Ethics or through your recommendation process. I've seen these types of things be very effective for groups like this, but please know that the power is in your hands to model this the way you would like.
Is there enough confidence to move forward, or is this a proposal that needs to be tabled for further consideration? What's your sense?
I think this came up when we were talking about some incidents that had occurred. I am very comfortable with what this is, based on what we experienced from before, which I want to feel comfortable when I come to a room. In every board that I have ever sat on in my entire business life, we have always had a code of ethics. This fits right in with every code of ethics that I've ever sat on every board I've sat on, both state and local. So for me, this fits just what we need.
To move this agenda, is there a motion on the floor?
I so move.
To accept or reject?
I second.
Is there a second? Can let me repeat this is that the motion is on the floor to accept this Code of Ethics policy offered? There's a proper second. Discussion, further discussion? If not, all those in favor of accepting this Code of Ethics policy, could you raise your hand, please? I'd like to see it. We'll count this.
Raise the hand, we don't need a roll count.
What's the number?
Those opposed? Those opposed?
Yeah.
One. Those abstaining? Abstaining? One.
Two abstaining.
Yeah. The motion passes. For the new project timeline,
Dr. Mullins, what about this joint here? The changes and recommendations.
So that, we can address that with the project timeline. So that, the new project timeline along with recommendation template and process was shared at the January 9th meeting. So we can definitely talk about that because it's still on the table in terms of being accepted and passed by the board. But this is an item of process. So I want to be able to just talk about the changes that have been made. I didn't get a chance to number the pages, but it is this page that has the blue and green sort of chart timeline. It's right after the ethics policy. The main difference between yes, towards the end of the packet, right after the ethics policy. What was the way holding up?
what are you holding up?
Nah, I'm not holding up
So
that.
that. yeah,
Changes
that
and
was
considerations.
At the January.
Yeah.
And it wasn't printed out in this package. but it's available as a part of the January meeting packet. And so I want to just go over the main differences and just hearing your feedback about the project timeline. The main difference that you'll see is that our recommendations, we're suggesting, or rather I'm suggesting through my recommendations in terms of project management, making sure that we present recommendations to the full commission at intervals throughout the year, with the final slate of recommendations happening around September. And we wanted to make sure that we built in time for community engagement, gathering community buy-in, gaining support for project implementation also. But we also wanted to make sure that we were using that full container of your 2-year term on the commission so that we can get that written report just written and submitted and project closeout in April 2024. Again, this is a process that will help me to help you all get from point A to point B, and there's a lot of moving parts and pieces. But I want to make sure that we do this in a way that everybody agrees on, that we get consensus on moving forward. So this is kind of the recommended updated timeline, but it's still broad enough to where we can move and be flexible as needed. So that's where we're at, and I'm happy to hear your questions about some of the considerations as well.
Oh, now?
Sure, yes, please.
Okay. The number 2, it says, the number 2, I just, these two together, you both presented these at the same time. And to me, it was like trying to control and not allow us to be as creative as we need to be to address how serious the need is for our communities with a process.
Can you read aloud the
No, you have it. You want to read it out loud? Because you have it.
My apologies, I don't have it.
Oh, you don't have it, okay. Well, I was just, these changes and considerations, I was like, I just feel that the 22 or how many people here are doing a tremendous sacrifice to come here to try to make it real. And a lot of us have already networks and been out here trying to work way before the city and the county even gave us the time of day or attention to do this work. So if we come here now, sacrificing our time, and then I keep seeing conflict of interest. A lot of us are natives here. So we, the 22 members, we already been hustling before this happening. And we come to this process and you say, we can't benefit from it, we can't do this, we can't move it, we can't show, we can't give favor to our projects that we've been scratching to keep moving. It don't make sense to me. Because we already made the sacrifice before we got here. So I'm like, how can this group be the test case on what this could look like for the rest of the community? And in order for that to happen, all of us got to learn how to hustle together right now, real soon. Because in my neighborhood, they still building. We in here talking and talking about stuff, other people building. And if we keep, shucking and jiving here and not really coming together like we should and being that model that we're going to show out to the rest of the community about how this could look and work, we creative pretending. You know what I'm saying?
I totally understand your frustration. This is a process that I've worked with in other communities as well. And so working with local governments, you really do sometimes have to recognize the constraints that exist. And so I think that's what you're referring to. And
No, we're creating more. We're creating more. And that's what I'm against. Where's the imaginative? Where's the imagination in this process?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm so confused.
So
I
let's
am so
table it.
confused.
Table it.
Can we, I don't know what he's reading from, and I don't know what.
I apologize. I should have attached all of the documents that were presented in January as well. So what you're seeing here is just the timeline.
It's a timeline,
It's
I
the
understand that.
timeline. So in your January meeting packet, there was also just a short presentation about the process and just making sure that we were all agreeing and coming to consensus on the recommendations process as well. In terms of writing the recommendations and creating those proposals. And so that's what he's referring to. I can send it back out. It is available digitally, but I did not print them out in today's packet.
But we're not taking, what I'm trying to hear him say is that we're taking processes backwards or not doing, are there constraints on what we're doing? I haven't seen that. I mean, I'm trying to understand what we're talking about.
I think we might need to just bring it back to the group as a whole.
Okay, that will work. Thank you.
And we'll table it?
Yeah, let's table it to next time.
Table it.
I am totally confused.
Sarah, may I have that as
Are you,
a motion?
and
'Cause
also,
we have it under-
I make a motion that we table this discussion
Second.
until.
Second.
Further discussion?
Yeah, there's
Program
question.
Z.
I'm trying to figure out what we're talking about too, like.
See,
Are we talking about the code of ethics that everybody?
No.
It sounds like you're
Changes.
referring to that.
It was.
This is item B under old business.
That's how it
This
started.
is the project timeline. We
Right.
took the vote, we took the
It
vote.
sounded like that's what he was talking about.
Yes.
Is it not what you're talking about?
No, y'all passed the code of ethics. This is a separate sheet. The code of ethics and this sheet came out at the same time.
So the vote of the code of ethics, did it include that form?
No.
No.
Did it not?
No,
Something different.
something totally
That's
different.
something different, okay.
So the motion on the floor is to table, it's been second.
I agree with that.
We'll bring back the recommendations process and timeline back to the group for discussion. And I'll send it back out for y'all to review.
Okay. Thank you.
Call for the question, there's a motion on the floor.
Is there a list of code of ethics that,
It's in your packet.
it is in the past? Okay.
All those in favor of tabling,
Code of ethics.
may I see a hand, please?
If we're gonna table it?
Yes.
Yes.
All those opposed to tabling? Those abstaining? In order to expedite our presentation, who is the presenting for the Racial Justice Coalition?
It'll be myself and Mike Holmes, and then Rob Thomas will be joining us for the Q&A.
Thank you.
And do you have a presentation?
We do. We sent it in, yeah.
Let's roll. Thank you very much.
For those of you wondering, item C under old business is dealing with the audit recommendations school working group. That's what I was asking at the beginning of the meeting.
So we don't have to.
My name is
Madam
spoken.
Chair. No, Mr. Chair. Yeah. Can we do the round table?
Yes, that's right. We've done it.
We don't need to.
Thank you, please.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Can you step up to the mic, please, so we can hear you?
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Elton. I'm fine. My name is Erin Barksdale, and I'm the Outreach and Engagement Director for the Racial Justice Coalition of Asheville. We just wanted to say thank you so much for inviting us to speak this evening, and we also want to take a second to thank you all for the time and effort you put into this process. We are extremely grateful. And I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Hello, y'all. I am Mike Holmes. I am the Canvassing Director at Racial Justice Coalition.
I'm Rob Thomas. I'm the ED of the Racial Justice Coalition.
So this PowerPoint will just be an overview of what our time together will look like. We'll talk a little bit about our Walk the Walk campaign and our Every Black Voice campaign, look at some of our past and future events, and then move into opportunities to collaborate with each other.
So this is a Mentimeter, so if you want to provide any feedback, it's anonymous. As soon as you post it, other people that have posted can also see what you've said. But this is just in case you want to provide any feedback, comments, ideas as we're presenting. You can go to www.menti.com and enter code 54689920. I'm also going to take advantage of the fact that you guys have those cards. So if you want to write down anything on the cards, any questions or comments, we can also collect those from you at the end of this as well. And I'll just give you a second, just in case. The QR code will take you directly there, so you don't have to enter any code.
First, we're going to share a little bit about our previous campaign, the Walk the Walk campaign. This campaign was a survey created in response to when the city of Asheville hosted listening sessions centered around reimagining public safety. They hosted a reported 5,797 people. 85 of the people interviewed identified as Black, which is 1.4% of the total amount interviewed. RJC felt it was crucial to hear the perspectives and thoughts of the Black community when it comes to fully reimagining public safety. To our knowledge, at this time, the city is still working through the analysis of the responses and community engagement. We're going to share some of the key findings from the Walk the Walk campaign and on the next few slides, but the full report can be found at our website, which is everyblackvoice.org. We also want to thank all the community members that participated in the survey, as none of this data would exist without them, and we want to express deep gratitude to Dr. Amina Batata at UNC Asheville and her students because this report exists because of their hard work.
Over 300 community members were canvassed as part of the Walk the Walk campaign, and 277 fully recorded interviews were transcribed and analyzed for this report. This pie chart shows the areas where interviewed individuals lived.
When interviewed, 94 people were asked about their race, and 52.2% of the people identified as Black or African American.
Among the 20 themes that emerged in response to the question of what concerns do you have for your community, youth and kids were expressed by 38.1% of community member respondents, expressing a lack of safe community environment. 34.9% of community members expressed that violence such as shootings and killings were concerns. 29.8% mentioned upkeep/housing conditions, expressing a need for cleaner conditions in their communities, cleaner apartment upkeep, and trash pickup. 25.6% of community members voiced a concern about drugs in the community and that they would like for needles to be picked up in their communities. Some themes that were less common included a concern for people outside the neighborhood, safety, and police. One person each stated concerns around poverty, religion, race, and resources available that aren't being used.
This slide here has some direct quotes from community members that were interviewed. These quotes are specific to community concerns. I'll read a couple. They are infested with bed bugs. I had Terminix out here yesterday for the 6th time, and I've been here for 2 years. My son had them all over his face. I put them in a bag. I'm taking them to the CEO. I've had enough. I've had enough. And it's just one room of mine. They're coming out of the walls. Another quote was, I want to see this place cleaned up. My kids can't even walk through the park because there's so many freaking needles.
Now we'll take some time to talk about one of our current and largest initiatives, the Every Black Voice campaign. The Every Black Voice campaign has a similar foundation as the Walk the Walk campaign, but it has grown into something much larger. We are currently focusing on community engagement through events and interviews that are centered around reparations. The Every Black Voice campaign is a community-partnered effort to create and advance equitable solutions regarding structural racism and inequities. The RJC fundamentally and passionately believes that deep community engagement begins with cultivating authentic relationships and inspiring Black joy. In addition to canvassing endeavors, EBV also leverages podcast forums and radio as well as social events as a way to recognize and elevate differing Black narratives of those within Buncombe County. The basis of this campaign is built on the shared belief that we all have that the reparations process should center the voices of Black community members, and we want to assist in doing that.
Seen here are our phases, are the phases of our research process. We have highlighted in blue the phases that we are in currently. 185 community members have been interviewed so far, with around 140 of those interviews being fully transcribed. We are in the process of finalizing the code book that will be used to code the interviews. And the coding is basically, deciphering the themes from the interviews, themes that we're hearing again and again, familiar ones, and creating a way to turn that qualitative information into quantitative data.
This pie chart shows the response distribution of one of the items on the survey. Have you heard anything about Asheville's reparations process? 30.9% of the responses have been no, and 69.1% have been yes.
Some additional survey items asked are, on a scale of 1 to 5, how concerned are you with blank? And you fill in that blank with one of the 5 impact focus areas of the Reparations Commission, which are criminal justice, economic development, education, healthcare, and housing.
These results are from the question of how concerned are community members with housing. We chose to display these results specifically because this focus area result had the highest percentage of 5s, with 5 being very concerned.
Seen here are a sample of some of the other questions asked in our survey, but the entire interview is available on our website, and that again is everyblackvoice.org. If you would like to look at them more in depth, the initial report will be shared with y'all when it is available. Some of the questions are, what has the city or county promised you or your community that they did not follow through on? And thinking about the healthcare system, what would reparations for the Black community look like?
Now we'll talk about some events. So we previously had 2 events, one at the Eddington Center and one at the Hillcrest Community Center. We did have reparations commissioners as panelists at both of those events. We have our collaborative event with the Health and Wellness IFA this Saturday. I did have a quick question. I know that I just want to make sure that we don't have a quorum, because I know that that's not something we can have outside of this from what I know. So if you do register, just make sure that you put somewhere in the open notes that you are a commissioner, so that we can make sure that we try and avoid that. But that is this Saturday at the United Way building in the conference room. And then we also have one in April 15th at the Shiloh Community Center, and we're hoping that the focus area is going to be housing.
As y'all saw earlier, this is a flyer for our event this Saturday. It's in collaboration with the Reparations Commission, Health and Wellness Impact Focus Area, and the Center for Participatory Change. It will be held at the United Way Building Conference Room from 12 to 3 p.m. Food and childcare will be provided, and we will also have some physical copies in the room if you like one.
Now, ways we can collaborate. So we have identified a few ways that we could potentially collaborate. As we just mentioned, we are already doing an event with the Health and Wellness IFA, and there's definitely opportunity for more collaboration like this. We would also love to know if there's anything specific you would like us to be asking in community that would be helpful in influencing and informing your IFA and general recommendations. We're also open to any ideas that you guys have as well.
Here are some ways that you can get in contact with us if you would like to collaborate or just speak to an RJC representative. You can email us at info@rjcaville.org. You can speak to us following this meeting or at another IFA meeting, as we always have representatives at those meetings, or you can specify a Mentimeter and be sure to add who you are so we can follow up. Thank you again for your inviting us to speak and for your time and consideration.
Open up the floor to any questions.
Yes. Thank you. Just a couple of them. You mentioned that 52.2% were African American respondents. Is that correct? At some point, I think you did. Let me also ask, was this survey geocoded by location, census tract, or minor civil division? Do you know?
I don't have the specific numbers as far as the demographics, but I don't think that they are 52%. All of our canvassing was done in public housing.
Okay, that was my question about where was this done?
For the Walk the Walk.
And I can go back to,
okay.
It shows you a distribution of the neighborhoods for the Walk the Walk campaign specifically.
Right.
There. Okay. And it was, you were correct, it was 52.2 of the people identified as Black or African American.
Thank you. And also another one deals with age and income. In those developments, we collected some economic demographic data from the Housing Authority, singularly on every development they had, economic data, race, sex, head of household, all of that. Those kinds of things are really helpful to the data collection process. So I was just wondering about that. Thank you.
And just to answer your question on the how it's geolocated, the main canvassing program that we use does utilize voter records to be able to figure out when we're canvassing, who is Black. I will say a lot of times when we're going door to door, sometimes in some of our communities, Black people aren't living in those addresses anymore.
So you're looking for specific individuals based on voter registration records, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. And all 9 developments, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And that's part of the way that we look for people. Sometimes we just show up to spots where there are frequently large conglomerations of people of color, like barber shops or other event spaces.
Along with utilizing social media to reach out to people to be a part of the interview. Or at our events, we have sign-up sheets where we get people who are interested in being interviewed as well.
If you haven't participated in one of our interviews, we have a team member over here, Ayatunde Dixon, who's amazing, and they have sign-up sheets if you do want to be interviewed. They're holding them up.
And is it okay if we share this presentation with the group?
Absolutely, yes, please. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions or if there is anything, any ideas you have about ways we can collaborate. We're very eager.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I have a feeling there will be when folks have a chance to look at your numbers.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you. And there is a correction. For the rest of the agenda, I'm assuming that our roundtable check-ins have been happening most of the evening. And the one correction is with public comment. We do have one person, public comment, Eden Mosley. Is Eden Mosley here? Yes, ma'am.
Chair.
Oh, please, please, just, if you can project from there, that's fine. If not, feel free to take the mic. And if take it for 3 minutes.
Hello, everybody. My name is Eden Mosley. I introduced myself previously before, but not like up here. I attend Carolina Day School. I am a junior. I'm glad to be here as a youth to like see and like hear how these are going to be distributed amongst the Black community. As someone that used to attend Asheville City Schools, mainly Asheville Middle School, and like being a victim of one of those 24 Black kids that was suspended. And during that time, I would like to see how racial trauma is going to be addressed amongst Black youth, because it is very serious, and that is also something I struggle with a lot. I developed anxiety because of schooling, because of my racial trauma from Asheville City Schools, and that's like the main reason why I moved. So definitely for like health and wellness, I would like to see how racial trauma would be touched on for Black youth, because it does really impact Black youth a lot, and that's what makes Black youth shut down, not want to participate or not do well in school, and that's what also contributes to the school to prison pipeline gap, because of the discrimination that we do face in public schooling. I was lucky enough for my parents to be able to bring me out of public schooling and put me back in private schooling, but not a lot of these Black kids here in this city can do that because of the income and how sometimes it's not even affordable to live here. But I would like to see how mental health will be addressed within schooling because it is really important. And also, I would like to see how the school to prison pipeline will be touched on and how to reduce suspension and expulsions within public schooling. That's really all I had to say, but I'm happy to be here. Again, my name is Eden Mosley. I attend Carolina Day School. If you want to reach out to me, my email is edenmosley859@gmail.com.
All right.
I just wanted to say thank you to Ms. Mosley for coming and speaking and giving your opinion and speaking so eloquently and blessing us with your voice. It's very appreciative, and I'm very happy that you were here.
And I just want to say, you never know whose life you're going to impact. She was one of those 24. And so it means so much. So thank you to the city, the manager, chief of police, and all those who rallied. You never know what these actions and what you do, how it's going to impact you. I just want to say that. God bless you.
Y'all commissioners make me proud. Y'all just make me proud. Listen, in wrap up, some of you have contacted me about not being able to get tickets for the Tom Coates presentation at UNCA. Those tickets are available, and I invite you. If you have trouble, please contact me.
Can I contact you now?
Actually, I would like to know. And in terms of your attendance at this meeting, it's great for your input.
I need these back. If you signed your agreement tonight, if you could pass those back to me.
Pass them out.
And if there is no more business, I entertain a move to adjourn.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?